With DoorDash, you can get your Starbucks pick-me-ups without the picking up. Seriously, we're bringing your go-tos right to you. Cheers to the anytimes, any reasons, and the anything in betweens. Starbucks delivery now available on DoorDash. Menu limited. See the DoorDash app for details. Tap the banner to order now.
This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I am your host, as the gentleman said, Steve Gould. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for checking the show out if it's your first time, and thank you for all the people that keep coming back for more. No credit to me at all. It's the men and women law enforcement that come on here and they tell their totally insane and crazy stories that happen. And the idea is we're going to get a better appreciation for what they do for us out there in society. So I want to thank everybody for the 5-star reviews on Apple Podcast. I'm at over 900 now. Like I've said before, if I could get to 1,000, that'd be so sweet for me. So keep them coming. 5-star reviews are good. I got a 2-star review recently and it wasn't great. So actually it was kind of like a critic. He looks like he has like a critical YouTube channel, and he like just picked one episode and then just kind of tore me apart in the Apple Podcast review section. But maybe because he's a YouTuber or maybe he doesn't care. But like when you rate on iTunes or Apple, it's not like YouTube. You're not leaving a comment. You're like actually rating the entire show, and everybody can see that. So I don't know. I always try to stress that, if you don't like it, that's fine. Just don't listen again. But if you do like it, the 5-star review is great, and anything less than that is stinky for me. So also, if you really love the show and you want to show your support, you can go ahead and click on the link in the show notes and become a Patreon patrolman and or sergeant. Few perks with each one. The sergeant level, you will get a shout out at the end. My thanks and my everlasting and never dying love for you. So you can get there in the show note links. It'd be great if I could figure out where this came from. All right, I'll do it manually. So today we are interviewing a West Coast copper. I met him through a good friend of mine, Ken Roybal. You know Ken from policebackground.net and the Police Applicant podcast. He was on there. I popped on live just to harass Ken, which is one of my favorite things to do. And I saw Eric on there, and I thought this guy would be a great interview, and he was happy to oblige, so I'm grateful for him. Let me read his intro here. What is going on with me today? Come on. I don't know what's going on. There we go. Eric is a Sergeant Washington State officer. As an officer and sergeant, he's been an FTO, K-9 handler, and part of the Civil Disturbance Unit responding to riotous incidents in and around Seattle. He's served 16 years, currently supervising the hiring unit, training unit, and the peer support team. His passion for officer wellness is featured through Blue Grit on Instagram. You'll see that above his picture when we switch to the interview mode. And he also has a podcast, Blue Grit Radio. So go check that out. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But without further ado, let me bring on Eric Tung. Eric!
Hey, man.
Hey, brother. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. My pleasure.
How long you been at the podcast game? Is it pretty new?
Yeah, it's pretty new. A few months. It's just kind of a new thing to try, and that's been what's been kind of exciting about getting on social media and exploring this kind of engagement to connect with cops and people that want to learn more about police, whether it's just a career for them or just to kind of understand more of what we're going through. But yeah, a bunch of people ask questions that are much better formatted for a little bit medium or longer form, Sure. A lot easier to explain rather than just writing it out. Although I do enjoy writing at times, but yeah, just kind of came as a little experiment to try out that way. And so it's been a fun thing to kind of learn a little bit more about.
Yeah, I like it. It's very cool, man. And your Instagram's blowing up. You have like over 4,000 on that. How did you meet the great Ken Roybal?
Yeah, so Ken, I was actually, this probably sounds bad, but I'm a huge fan of trying to be humble. So I actually wasn't really familiar with what Ken's work was with the Police Applicant podcast or with his company, but in my more recent assignment with my recruiter, Brian, so I'm currently the hiring and recruiting sergeant at my police department. But he actually found it, and many of our applicants, once we got on there, we started talking about it. Many of our applicants had been followers and fans of the podcast. So in just an effort to kind of expand on more horizons and get our names out there and just get our, I guess, our message out there as far as law enforcement and connecting with new applicants and prospects, we connected with Ken and got on an episode with him, and it was tons of fun. So it's been great just to connect with him outside of that, or, I've been able to follow up with him in Minerva, which has been a blast.
Yeah, they're great, man. They have a great show. And like I said, whenever they go live, I try to come on and harass them. But Ken is like a wealth of knowledge with backgrounds. He's testified as an expert in backgrounds. He did it forever at LAPD. So he really is a wealth of knowledge. And how long have you been in backgrounds or part of that or supervising that portion of your PD?
Yeah, I've only been back there for about 8 or 9 months. And so I came out of a neighborhood response team, which is more of the community engagement, neighborhood problems, working with property owners and business owners and apartment complex managers. So it was a short stint there, but really it was just, I think like a lot of agencies are realizing, the biggest challenge is staffing, and that comes with numbers and high attrition rates following the last couple of years that we've been facing. So really that was me just thinking about where I could have the biggest impact for my team and for my community. Although I just got to a unit that I'd been looking forward to for quite a while, working small unit dynamics and pretty flexible span of work. I was hesitant to go to recruiting, but it actually ended up being an awesome challenge, ton of fun. Learned a ton through backgrounds and just engagement and looking at policing from a different seat, a different angle.
Sure. Yeah. Do you guys do like posters and stuff like that? Like the PD propaganda like LA does?
I mean, we have like a couple posters. They're more like flyers. Not really though. Part of feel free to steal it if you're listening and you got recruitment needs for your department. But my thing was whatever everyone else is doing, I didn't really want to do it.
Right.
So people were doing billboards, they were doing radio ads, and, every local, media outlet was trying to contact us saying, hey, we feel for you. And, my brother's a cop somewhere, and it was really appealing at first, but then I realized it was very much like a theme of wanting to help out. And then the dollar signs are just astronomical for these tiny little radio featurettes.
Oh, yeah.
And then my thought was, one, if someone hears a radio ad and they're going to test for local police, at least out here, there's only a couple companies that do all the testing contract-wise. So if you test for one, then you're going to test for 5 or 10. And so
it's the most annoying background to do. And there's I've applied to 10 police departments. Damn it.
Yeah, it's good and bad because, we have a lot of software that can streamline that. And we have a great dynamic with our local agencies where, we're on a first name basis with most of our neighbors in surrounding counties or within the county. And if someone got DQ'd some people get disqualified for, kind of case by case reasons. One agency might be okay with this, one might be more strict. But the ones that get DQ'd after a number of years, 5 or 10 times over, usually there's something, and we're pretty quick to share it just so we can, share that information and be on the same team in a way, although we are actively competing for your hot prospects. So that happens too.
Yeah. I've had that before when I was in backgrounds. It was like, you find one he just spammed everybody, but is awesome. So you start calling them the background message is like, oh, he applied with you guys. Then everybody starts speeding up to try to get the kid on board. At LA, that was very rare. It was usually sifting through heaps of garbage. There was some good ones in there, but when I was there was towards things were real. 2017, I was there, and then it started to get more and more woke. And then the cool posters they had of they would get the best looking and most physically fit LA cops with machine guns doing entries or doing whatever that was their poster. It went to a woman in the subway playing an acoustic guitar, and it was LAPD at the bottom, and we were everybody that worked there was who's this gonna get? This is so weird.
Is that what we do every day? I mean, it takes all types. Right. So I think especially in the agency like LAPD, you really can get into the weeds with every little dynamic or personas of the officers, but also just assignments.
Yeah.
But some agencies don't have that luxury, right? You can't, I mean, there is some degree of false advertising, right? I've been at numerous recruiting events where a recruiter will stand up and say, hey, this job's everything you want it to be. You can do whatever you want in this job. And I'm like, well, maybe, right? Like in my city, like, yeah, you have a lot of opportunities to wear different hats and get on different assignments. But I mean, you got to grind. Like it's busy, right? You might want everything to do with community engagement in schools and interacting with kids. And you might have some free time as a new officer in patrol, but the crime rate's high, right? So it's like, you got to squeeze it in. And if it matters to you, yeah, you'll make it work. But some other cities, maybe slower suburbs, like cool, that you might have all kinds of discretion to do that and discretionary time.
Yeah.
But I hate hearing that, like that broad stroke thing where agencies are so worried about what they put out because they're worried about limiting their applicant pool to a certain group. But I'm like, hey man, like just tell it how it is. And we got pretty comfortable after a little bit once we started getting some traction saying, hey, our city's pretty high crime, it's pretty high pace, but it's fun. It's a grind. If you take care of yourself and take care of your people, mind your boundaries, then, you can focus on wellness and navigate the career pretty well, but it's not easy. And I think that's helpful when you set people up for success.
Yeah. I remember, I went to a college in Massachusetts. It's a big CJ school, and like my junior year, so it must have been like early 2000s, late 90s. There was LAPD was there. They used to send uniformed officers around the country to job fairs, and so there was a guy. There was a couple of coppers there, and they were looking good, dressed to the nines. And just like you said, I was looking at it, and I graduated with a computer degree, so I got into law enforcement like backwards. But my dad was a cop. I grew up around it. I'd thought about it, and I went and I was talking with them, and he was like, I was like, I don't know, when I get like third shift in Watts or something. And he's like, oh no, what are you, computer degree? You'll get right in the IT department. You'll be making 70 G's before you know it. And like in the early 2000s, $70,000 was like, what? He's like, oh yeah. He's
That's
like,
great.
You'll slip right in. And I'm like, I'm not stupid. I was like, yeah, this guy's recruiting. I don't think I'm going to fly to LA to take the test,
Yeah.
Eric, let's get into the stories here. Can you tell us about the first hot call you responded to as a young Officer Tung?
Yeah. So the first thing I can think of was just on field training, right? And as I mentioned before, South King County, like my city's pretty steady, but a lot of new officers are waiting for their first code run, their first tone out, right? So this came in as a physical domestic dispute. An assault had occurred. One party pushed the other party over, and the victim was bleeding out of the head on the pavement, right? So we scream up there. I'm probably like total tunnel vision, like every new guy.
Heart's pounding.
Just like, please don't drive by the address, or, don't make too many wrong turns because you're block one and you're getting graded every second that you're there.
Right.
Every second anyone's watching. But we get there, and it turns out, it sticks out to me because it was just a complete 180 from what I thought it was. As you find out over time that dispatch is just the information they're given.
Yeah.
But it turned out to be an elderly couple, and this is, I want to make sure that no one thinks that I'm making fun of this situation. I was just completely surprised, but it was an elderly couple where the wife had dementia, and she had shoved back her husband, and so he did trip and he hit his head, and there was blood, but it wasn't profuse. And it was one of those things where it sounds weird, but even in your mind, when you're maybe through academy and how long you wanted the job, you start thinking about all these stories and what they're going to look like.
Yeah.
And then you get that call and you get the limited information.
You think it's going to be the worst thing you've ever seen?
Yeah, you're expecting like a movie scene, right? And so, you're expecting to to have to surround and maybe like bust the door down, and what it's going to take to get this suspect, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But then it's just it's a poor couple that dealing with dementia, which is, I'll say, one of the saddest things that I've encountered through, my friends and their lives, their personal lives, but then for sure at work, it's one of the saddest things. And then having that really kind of awkward moment with my FTO, just saying, hey, sir, I know that technically this is a mandatory arrest in the state, but can we not? He's like, no, it's not a thing we don't do that with a situation like this. Right. Yeah. So that was very comforting that we didn't have to go down that way.
Sorry, Grandpa, you're coming with me.
Yeah. It's that weird notion of being brand new. You're like, hey, you say use common sense, but I'm just not sure what the landscape is right now. So
yeah, you don't want to get in trouble or do the wrong thing.
No, you don't know. And you really don't know a lot. And so I think it's helpful to think of those stories from when you're brand new and you're kind of you're a total mess. And I think that a lot of times after a few years, you forget how much of a, absolute shit show you were. You hear a lot of these more experienced officers or even very senior officers, talking about the new crop and all that. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, hey, I heard stories about you. I certainly have stories about myself and the flubs that we made.
Right. Now they're perfect.
It's
right?
just a lot to learn. Right. But it's the times, they say. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I hear that all the time. Where I work at, I work in a very small department, but if we get somebody new, once in a while we'll get somebody new. And it's a challenge because we're small and they basically just ride with me and I have to break them in. And it does take you back when you see somebody who's like nervous to go on the radio. Like, because now after you've done it for so many years, but I can think back to when I started being on a frequency where everybody's going to hear you and, the phonetic alphabet and all this stuff. You got to know where you are, the locations. It's a lot when you roll up to your first big crash or something, you know what I mean? And then you got to call plates in. Is everybody okay? How many ambulances do you need? You can see it in new people's eyes. It's just like they're drinking from a fire hose, And I always
it's the deer in headlights. It's just sensory overload, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thankful to be where I am now, the years in that I have now, where a lot of the stuff is just kind of second nature. Like we just know what to do. But Academy prepares you, but really you don't learn until you're field training. Like when you actually see, like you said, if you approach that situation how you were trained in Academy, Grandpa'd be going to jail for assault and battery, whatever you guys would have him on. But yeah, the dementia thing, man, is so sad. I worked in a community that had an older population, and I went to a few that were one of them, the guy died, and we kept we're waiting for the medical examiner, and she kept walking. She was trying to vacuum and kept walking by him, trying to wake him up. She kept forgetting he was dead, and we had to keep retelling her. So it was this poor woman was breaking down multiple times, reliving the most horrible event of your life. Your spouse is dead, just over and over. So we basically just stopped telling her because I'm like, I can't keep doing this. I'm gonna fall apart here. I can't keep seeing this woman So I just let her vacuum around him, and just. He was in a chair, so it wasn't like she was doing it. But it was man, what a horrible thing. And then I had another one where the guy, sweet couple, married 50 years, and he just started beating her. Just started attacking her. He'd be at the kitchen table, and he would just, boom, close fist her in the face when she's handing him his eggs.
Man.
Just to turn into a different person, but he had dementia going on, so he was afraid. He didn't know where he was and didn't know who she was.
Right.
And, man, that is a brutal thing to deal with. I'm glad your sergeant or FTO was lenient.
Yeah. He was the senior FTO, so he'd been around and he knew what the deal was. So
how long do you guys do FTO for? How many weeks?
It stayed pretty standard. It's roughly 4.5 months. We do a little period of a couple weeks, a 0 week where they get acclimated and not graded. So. But we are finding more and more it's, the job's more complicated than ever. It's definitely way more complicated than when I started. So, we're trying to be flexible to that and recognize some people just need different learning styles and maybe they need a different trainer, or just more time, more reps. We definitely saw that with the, I'll say kind of the COVID recruits, right? Academy, was, a lot of it was not hands-on, right? So you're not learning a whole or a lot of practical skills. And then when we had a, COVID world, most people, because jail populations had to be reduced down so much, like a lot of people weren't going to jail unless it was something super significant. So you had people getting through field training with very limited experience detaining someone or even putting their hands or cuffs on someone. Yeah. So you did see like there was an issue with just plain practice and experience.
Yeah, I've talked about that before, going hands-on. That maybe for me at least was one of the most awkward and weird parts of becoming a cop, where like the part where you actually relinquish somebody's freedom, like, okay, time to take them. And that is really, for me, it was really learned through working with senior guys to see when they knew it was like, when someone's not going to go and it's just time to do, like, you've already asked enough and it's just time to do the thing. Mm-hmm. I learned that from working with senior guys. And, if you come up, like we had a few COVID academies where they did like a third of it over the computer, the DI is supposed to shout at you through the computer. Yeah. Lower your monitor so I can see your push-ups. Like, it makes it tough for those kind of decisions, especially where I work. A lot of departments, they run one-man shifts. So like you were saying, like things have changed a lot. Like it's a lot to have an arrest now. And especially like my dad was a sergeant. He was a cop, then a sergeant and lieutenant, but he started in the late 70s into the early 2000s when he retired. And he said like a domestic, you used to go there and it was simple assault and battery. So there was no right to arrest. It wasn't in his presence. In mass, you can only arrest assault and battery unless it was serious bodily injury or if it's in your presence. So if you didn't see it and the wife didn't want to report it, well, then women ended up dead because the husband's standing behind him going like, don't report it. So they changed all the domestic laws. And now they're at the point where like there's a minimal holding time for the arrestee. You're contacting multiple state agencies. You're issuing all kinds of rights and victim resources, and then even defendant resources for anger control. And there's just a lot of stuff going on that you have to remember. And if you're working in a smaller place that's not as fast paced, you need a checklist almost. It's like if you're not doing this stuff all the time, it can be a real bear.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you guys have, sounds like you guys have a pretty good sized place. So you have like levels of supervision and all that stuff on staff. You're like it's a big police department. Yeah. We're almost 170 full sworn staff if we're fully staffed. Right now, although we're doing pretty well in that regard, especially given the times and, neighbors and what people are facing, so many people are, they're not operational. They're in training or they're in the pipeline academy. We have a super young department. I see that with all our neighbors, and I'm sure that there's some degree of that nationwide. But, an adage is, kind of like the blind leading the blind. But, we don't really think of the small agencies so often because we don't have any right next to us. But like you're mentioning a one person department, like, or one person on shift, right? Like, it's you just leading you, right? Like you don't have the example to follow. So you really are left to limited devices. Yeah, it's hard. Like I'm a sergeant there and there may be overlap with shifts once in a while, but like basically when somebody's cut loose from training, they'll just call me and be like, what do I do? I had a drunk driver drive through a house. I got him. I'm with him now. And it's like, oh my God, I feel bad for them because it's like, you shouldn't be doing this by yourself. You know what I mean? So we actually will come in for bigger events from our homes to help, but it's challenging, man. Sometimes I think of the back in the day type stuff, like when my dad first started, it was like so much simpler and they got the job done. Like they did it, but there wasn't so much scrutiny. You know what I mean? It was just kind of like there was a lot of forgiveness as long as you were acting in good faith. It was like, hey, he was like, my dad said when he first started, there was a judge that in his district at district court that if you brought a guy in beat up and he attacked the cops, he wouldn't even listen to the guy. He'd be like, well, you got arrested. Why'd you fight? Well, X, Y, and Z. He goes, well, you shouldn't have resisted. That's why you got beat up. That was it. That was the answer. You shouldn't have resisted the police. What are you doing? And now it's obviously, as you know, way different. But Eric, Can you tell us about a strange or bizarre thing you've dealt with in your career?
Yeah, I think, one of the first things that comes to mind is just probably one of my canine calls. It's probably not the line of thinking for most people that get asked that question, but one of my early canine calls was a domestic situation. I was actually going to the neighboring city, but what's keying in my mind to this story is that I had never been so surprised that someone I guess my story will explain kind of where I'm going, but the suspect, the offender was so disconnected with reality, right? And I just never had felt that kind of eerie feeling of someone like that at that time. So just to go back to the scenario, it was a domestic situation. It was actually two adult brothers. One assaulted the other with a garden implement is all the information we really had, but I never made it quite to the scene, so I didn't see the victim. But the neighboring city was like, yeah, I mean, he hit him with like a rake or something, split his head wide open. So we're talking about felony level assault. And so really where we start the dog was, at the back of the property, and it goes right into the woods, which is any canine listening. That's kind of like your ideal scenario. Really low contamination. There's not going to be other people around, hopefully. So the dog just goes. So my dog Kato at the time, we'd start tracking through the woods, and we have a couple officers with us, all from that city, neighboring city. And we're tracking through, and fast forward, we eventually get to this actually paved path where it's a pretty main trail thoroughfare. And we track to the guy, and it's, of course, like storybook. It's becoming like, dusk. So it's getting dark. You're having to use your lights, but you can see figures. You can see the general layout of stuff. It's not totally pitch black, but as we come up, we see a figure. And as we get closer, we see that everything's matching, right? The silhouette is of, adult male, roughly the same height, short buzzed hair. The race matches everything. And he's just standing there, just like stoic. It's almost like backlit, so you can't really even see his face or emotion. But then as we got closer with the lights and we're challenging him, announcing who we are and the whole thing, hey, we got the dog, like, get down on the ground, you're under arrest, it becomes abundantly clear this is the dude, right? This is the dude we're looking for. Clothing matches everything. And he's just standing there just like a statue. So as far as bizarre, I'm like, that was one of the first times, and there were several thereafter. But the first times in my canine career where I'm like, some people don't give an F, right? Like some people don't care. Like you're the police, you got multiple officers, and we talk about how the police can be very intimidating and scary. Like, yeah, no, I get it. Like I didn't know any cops growing up, and I mostly stayed out of trouble. But if I got pulled over, I was terrified of, getting in trouble, or, really I was afraid of my mom, what would happen. But is it kind of the transference of fear? Cause she'd really whoop me. But no, it's really just, I'd never experienced that. And that became a thing where some people just don't care, right? They're not in fear of seemingly anything, right? They're not in fear of arrest. They're not in fear of this dog that,
usually everybody's afraid of the dog.
And I have opposite stories too, where, SWAT guys with lasers and every kind of weaponry and armor and the yelling, and they're big dudes. They're all very domineering. And then, dude on the couch just blinking at him, not listening to the damn thing. And then I round the corner and dog starts growling. And then all they can do is say, don't let go of that dog. Don't let go of that dog. I'll do everything you say. Like, I'm like, don't even talk. Like, I hear you, man. Like, listen to what they're saying, but they can't even. The dude I'm thinking of couldn't even break his focus from the dog, which is, I mean, that's compliance, right? That's what we want. Like, we want people to, do as they're asked and not resist and not fight. But cut back to my original story. This guy was a different story. So what happened was, he was standing there. It was kind of a stalemate. He's not doing everything we say, and obviously it's the dude. As we got closer and we could identify him. So we try to arrest him. He immediately resists. we back up, let the dog go. He's backing up, but then he actually, you see, he kind of turns to the side. I remember this is like, I see the profile of him, I see the profile of my dog, and it's, it's getting dark, but I just see this, like, this jabbing motion from the side, and I just hear the, and then I'm like, yeah, and it's like everything slows down. And it was probably, like every critical incident, it was probably just a fraction of a second, but it felt like seconds where I was in my brain space, like, holy shit, like the movement and the yelp of the dog, like, did he just stab my dog? Like, I remember thinking that very, like, awkward, kind of obvious, like, no duh kind of question, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
it's almost surreal, though. You can't believe he's doing it.
Yeah. You're like, I didn't see a knife. I didn't see anything. So I pull my dog back, right? He's still in a long lead. I pull him back, and then we're all just kind of backed up from him. The guy's standing there, and now that everything's kind of refocusing, it's dark, but I see the dude's hand, holding down at his side, like a pocket knife, like a couple inch kind of folding knife. And he's just standing there, and, guns are drawn, lots of challenges, just kind of commotion. But I just remember kind of backing up a little bit from the other guys, just kind of checking my dog up. And then I see, there's that dark, thick, liquid right on my finger. So it's blood, and I can see it's in his fur, and he's a dark coat dog. So I'm like, well, shit, like, now what?
Yeah.
So that was one of the things, you prepare yourself. I'm a dog lover, and that's most people that get into canine are so, and that's a lot of what gets you interested in that route, working with the dog and getting bad guys. But then I was in this frame of, like, I've pictured, and I tried to visualize, like, having to sacrifice, quote unquote, sacrifice your dog to save human life or to save an officer or an innocent victim.
Yeah.
We understand that's a risk, but I hadn't ever really conceptualized, like, what is it in that moment? Like, how do you prioritize all the things, right? There's still this guy that needs to be arrested who is clearly not. You just stabbed the dog. And then I start thinking case law, right? So again, this is probably all just seconds, but I start thinking, okay, well, he's got a knife. If he comes towards us, we'll have to shoot him. Like, there's no other way. You can't send the dog and get stabbed, and then he comes past the dog. And
right.
I'm saying this partially, I think most cops would be like, well, yeah, no duh. But for the other listeners, like, there's legal precedent to what you can and can't do. Right. At the same time, you have case law saying that if he runs away after bludgeoning his brother and all that, then that's a legal lethal shoot now too. And I say now, currently in Washington, that it'd be arguably not. But I don't want to digress down that.
Or could you formally shoot a fleeing felon or someone who committed an act like that?
At the time, yes. So yeah, based on Tennessee v. Garner, Graham v. Garner, right? You have all the factors where if he ran,
you could cause harm to somebody else.
Yeah, and he ran from us, that would have been a legal shoot. However, now there's in Washington, well, since people are going to be curious, there's a notion that it needs to be immediate. There needs to be an immediate threat, right? So if he's in the woods and he's running away from us, the police, like, can we articulate an immediate threat? And it's not, you'll probably have quite a bit of debate, but in that scenario, I think a lot of officers would say you do not.
If he's just running they want him to be running towards, like, a playground with kids is basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Or back into a house with people in it, or which is too bad. They haven't gone that far here yet, but it's a tough job, and sometimes people need to be killed. You know what I mean? Like, there's the good guys, there's the cops, there's the public. We need to protect them. Why would you, just logic would say, why would you take a chance on this guy who's already assaulted somebody horribly and now is going to run off with a knife? Why is it fair even, or just, to let that person leave that could possibly hurt the public? In my mind, that's how I think. That's why I think that would still be a good shooting, but that's not the day and age we live in. So
yeah,
we got to follow.
Especially in Washington. I mean, we understand, like, we would love to do make every reasonable effort to catch him through lesser uses of force or something else. Of course. At that point, like, you tried that, right? You tried the canine, and you tried compliance, right? Just verbal, and it escalates from there. But it doesn't work, you don't have another means.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of people are super dangerous. So in any case, kind of at the standstill where he's just standing there. I'm like, well, and clearly the officers with me agreed with the situation we had. We're kind of at the stalemate. The next part, like, it was kind of a blur, but I'm like, man, I can't let the dog go. And he was really pulling to try to get back in there. So good on Cato. He was a real troop. But, the officers just kind of surrounded and tried tasing and getting it closer to spray. And it ended up being kind of a mess where luckily, no one got stabbed after that, but he got overwhelmed and distracted with the OC spray. He kind of tripped and fell down, and then people kind of went in to tase and get him under custody. So that part wasn't so much involved with, but now I was in this super unfamiliar area. It wasn't my city. I'm on this like random, big trail that I know by name, and I know kind of the general directions it goes, from this city to that city or the other way.
This is an away game for you. You're out of jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Assisting.
And no one's by any cars, right? And so I'm just like, well, I guess we're just going to go and just scoop him up. And I don't want him, really exerting himself because he could bleed out, and I don't know how bad it is. But at the same time, I'm like carrying him. I'm like, man, he's like super freaked out that I'm carrying him. He's like uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so I just like I momentarily set him down.
It's emasculating. He's like, don't touch me. Don't pick me up.
Yeah. He's like, yeah.
I'm tough.
Gonna just drop, more words. Yeah. Dad, what are you doing? But I'll spare you the suspense and say that, my dog was okay. We basically just kept hoofing it down this path, and there was a car on containment perimeter, another agency that was kind of providing assist on that end. And then luckily that officer knew where the closest, emergency vet was. Dispatch put it out, and then we just got in the back of the Crown Vic, or a lot of them back then. Just took off, and I just remember that, that evening just standing there, just, kind of looking through to the operating, room and just being like, man, is this it? And I think we'd only been in the game for like, maybe 1.5 to 2 years. But yeah, you really think about, I thought about it a lot since, he had a full career, and retired him when I promoted. And he got a couple years here at home, as a retired dog, and lived it up there at the good life.
Yeah.
But yeah, I reflect a lot about like, the close calls that we've been in together. And, that was certainly a close call for him.
In Washington,
dogs are,
would it have been, is that considered like assault and battery deadly weapon on an officer because he stabbed the dog?
Good question. No, it's not. So, dog, even a police dog is considered property. So there is a separate statute harming a police dog, but it's like a gross misdemeanor. It's it's kind of a joke. So yeah, it's not even felony level. But luckily the stab was like shallow, and like he kind of got him like twice, but luckily it was shallow enough that it didn't puncture into, the vitals. So it was mostly just, fat layer and a little bit of muscle. Yeah, dogs are super resilient. I think 2 weeks he was out, and then he was back at it, like all healed up and ready to go. So
dogs are tough, man. It's so sad to see an animal hurt too, because it's like they're totally innocent. He's just being a good boy. Like he's just doing what he's supposed to do. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That must have been really hard. I'm so happy to hear. What kind of dog was he? A shepherd or a Malinois or whatever?
Yeah, he was a shepherd. He had some European lines, and so he's sable. So if you can picture the ones that are kind of black and gray and brown, everything. Yeah. So.
Man. Well, I'm glad he got some. Glad old Cato got a little breather at the end. Was he cool with retiring, or was he high strung?
He was cool with retiring. So that's where I actually joke about it. I'm like, he wasn't the best dog, but I wouldn't have traded him for anything else. When I say he wasn't the best dog, I came into it with, I was training with the other canines, and, you typically do that, right? Whatever unit you want to get in, you do the dirty work, and you're the hang around for a long time. So for me, it was, being the decoy and training with them weekly if I could, putting on the bite sleeve or the bite suit and tramping through the woods and getting all found and bit. But yeah, like I knew a lot of dogs in the region that, you have stories about how they would just lose their mind if they were not going to work. And some of it would be as simple as like an afternoon going to court and having to leave the dog at home and dogs like spinning and, tearing stuff up.
Dude,
and
I don't
those
know
are
how
the
you
dogs
guys
that, like,
do it, man. When I talk with a canine guy and his dog is chirping in his ear the whole time, I'm like, how are you not out of your mind?
Yeah.
It drives me nuts. The amount they bark. If you just walk up to the cruiser to talk to the guy. These are mostly the Malinois. Is it true that they
it can be both? It can be both.
Is a shepherd better for a new handler because they're a little bit less drive? They're a little bit lower.
I'd say a generality is that Mals are super high drive, super crazy. You definitely do see a lot of shepherds that are too. And so typically you have a lot of newer handlers that most trainers won't really, or, even administrators won't really want to put with the most crazy dog. But not always. You have some high drive dogs that are super handler responsive, right? They'll listen really well. They're just, no pun intended, but they're chomping at the bit. Whereas you just have some dogs that are really hard, and that's more like they're going for alpha and they're going to take a shot at the title, meaning they'll work their way up the lead and snap at the handler until that dominance is established or maintained.
I saw that, man. I went on we were using the sheriff's department. Number one, I went on a track with a Malinois that at the beginning of the track, he said, "Stay back. He just bit a cop 2 weeks ago." Great. So now it's like pitch black. We're hunting for this roided out maniac that's just attacked his parents in the marsh on the coast of Massachusetts. I'm like, and I got to worry about this dog. And then a second time, like you said, his dog was a total alpha maniac, and it was going nuts. And this handler from the sheriff's office just took his mag light and just put it right between the dog's ears. Boom! Right on top of its head. And like, he didn't injure the dog, but it was enough where the dog like assumed the beta position or whatever. The dog was like
dazed or something.
Yeah. But he said,
I'd heard stories about that.
I've heard of guys hanging their dogs, like just hanging a dog. Like, this is old school, but I knew a handler that said, one of the top trainers said, if you have a dog like that, they will like pull them up by their leash around like a branch and choke the dog out. And I was like, that sounds like maybe the dog just shouldn't be a canine.
Yeah, it seems like too much. So that's what I'll say is I hate hearing stuff like that. Especially, I hope it's done now. Who knows? Definitely not in our region, but you'd hear stories about how, canines having to like literally fight their dogs and pin them or, thump them or something, like generations prior to me. Like, we hear these stories and don't know how much is true, but I would not be surprised if some dynamic of that is. But at the same time, like, you gotta, the liability is so high. And this is where I really appreciate my dog when I said that, he was a great dog for me and I wouldn't trade anything, because I think things happen for a reason and we made it out of a lot of tough jams together. I'm still here today. So, so I wouldn't trade it, but he was still the dog that, like, when I retired him, he was like good with it. And that was nice, right? It was nice. He wasn't the constant spinner. He wasn't always barking in my ear. He actually wasn't, he was really good with kids. Like, I could take him to do show and tells at schools. So that's a really balanced temperament that I preferred. And then there are some dogs, like, they're great work dogs, and you just will not have them around kids, right? It's all right, but it is a different challenge, right?
Yeah. Like, we have the best dog right now. I'm so grateful for it. Not a police dog, just my house dog. It's our third German Shepherd, but he's like a little north of 100 pounds. He's got that big, huge head. And he just has, we went to, this time I really decided I'm going to pay extra for like the right dog. Cause the one before him, his name was Kaiser. He was insane. His dad was a Dachshund or whatever bite champion in Eastern Europe.
Oh, Schutzen, yeah.
Schutzen, yeah. And I just bought him. It was so dumb. It was like I was on midnights for 5 years. So I'm like, I want a dog home with my wife and kids. And he just was like, he should have had a job. He just was like, he would be so excited when I came home. I couldn't even acknowledge him, because if I did, he would like destroy the house, running around, knock the kids over, never attack a kid, but like he just was like high strung. So I said, this time when I buy a Shepherd, I'm going to go to like, I'll spend $2 or $3 grand for the right dog. And I found a lady on the border of Mexico in Campos, California, and she bred for size, health, and temperament. And she did those tests for their temperament, which I never believed in. totally balls on. The dog is exactly the dog she said he would be. He's stoic when he needs to be. If someone comes on the property, and plus he's 100 pounds, so like his bark, you can feel it in your chest. He is like, he acts the right way. With the kids, the only thing he does with the kids that's a little bit annoying is he does a lot of shepherding. He's a German Shepherd. Oh yeah. But he does like a lot of like circling them and like he'll like hit them with his muzzle, and shepherds do bite a lot. There's a lot of bites recorded for shepherds, but like the majority of those are like correction bites. Like, let me get this little lamb where it needs to be.
The nip and the nudge. Yeah.
Yeah. They do a little bite that doesn't break the skin or like necessarily hurt someone, but it's like it's uncomfortable to be bit by a dog.
Yeah.
He doesn't do that, but he does do the like annoying, if the kids get high, I have 3 kids. If they get high pitched and running around in circles outside, it just activates. Like, he just can't help it. He'll just start he'll circle them, which is great. He keeps an eye on them because we have a big property here, 4 acres. But he is absolutely the best dog that way. And I think it's crazy when I know some people who buy, like I did, like an idiot, buy high-strung working dogs and or those Belgian Shepherds, and they think like, this is cool. I saw them do backflips on Instagram. They're so athletic.
Yeah.
Well, now you have this, like, they call them alligators. Now you have this dog that like really needs a job. He wants to do something.
For sure.
You're leaving him at home for 10 hours when you're commuting to and from work, and you're wondering why he's, taking all the cushions off your couch and just, attacking the curtains and all that stuff,
Yeah, they need work, right? They're going to find work, and work might be tearing this whole couch into tiny bits.
Yeah, or your shoes.
Or escaping, right?
This smells like master. I'll eat this. I'll eat these dozen dress shoes.
Yeah, they need an outlet, just like our high energy counterparts, right? They need hobbies and they need something to learn, mental stimulation. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Hey everybody, Harvey Levin here from TMZ. We have something really exciting for you. We have officially launched the TMZ Audio Network. In addition to the TMZ podcast, we have 3 all-new shows. There's Last Days, which explores the final days of some of the biggest icons in sports and entertainment. If you're into the drama surrounding the royal family, well, we have Spilling Royal Tea. And for all you sports fanatics out there, Michael Babcock is the host of the TMZ Sports Podcast. Check out all 4 podcasts right here on Spotify.
Now with DoorDash, you can get your Starbucks go-tos delivered right to you. Early morning meeting? Treat yourself to a breakfast sandwich. Scored the winning point? Celebrate with a cold brew. Feeling exceptionally awesome? Keep doing you. Your usual is on the way. Coffee delivery makes every moment worth celebrating. So come on, make your day. Starbucks delivery now available on DoorDash. Tap the banner to order now. Menu limited. See the DoorDash app for details.
Eric, can you tell us about your most intense or terrifying call that you've been on?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about this call with Ken, but it is the closest call I've had, like the closest brush I've had, and so I think it's appropriate, and I'll just get into it where it's another Cato story, so you're welcome. I was on my time off, and I was actually, in the salon chair about to get my hair cut, but just as it goes, my phone starts ringing in my pocket, and, she hadn't started yet. So the clippers are on, and I'm like, hold on. Like, I don't know, everything happens for a reason, but for whatever reason, I felt like the need to risk, that one, like
leave with half a haircut.
For whatever reason, I rolled the dice, and I was like, man, I got to answer this. And sure enough, it was my old sergeant calling and saying, hey, we had a dude that, tried to, he got stopped by one of our officers this morning at a seedy motel, and he was playing the name game, and he actually tried to assault the officer. And then as he took off running, he pulled a gun. And it's like Sunday, late morning, super crowded market, it's kind of a produce market and, landscaping shop that he's running towards, but it's pretty highly populated. There's a Denny's there, all this stuff. So, he's basically looking for a dog team to come in. I'm like, yeah, man, I'm coming. So I just got to swing by the house and grab the dog in the car and we'll go. And so fast forward, they'd set up containment for a little while, and it's summertime. We tracked for quite a while, and, we're not really coming up with anything. The contamination's so high, the heat's on, outside, as far as like for canines, like the scent's kind of cooking off. So, it's not really being preserved.
Does that happen if it's like real hot, the scent will disappear?
Yeah, it takes some time, but, luckily in the Northwest, it rarely gets so hot, but then, the dog gets tired, and it's all a factor. The environmental factors are huge as far as like how long that scent's going to be good. But fast forward that, I had a nice little gaggle with me, a handful of officers, because the dude was armed. And so we had, an officer with a rifle. We had a couple officers back up, with their pistols. And basically we checked all different directions, but where the last spot was, it was kind of this closed yard, and it was like a landscaping company, and there's trucks back there, and this big kind of this trailer, and then this kind of semi-enclosed kind of tarpaulin structure, so like a Quonset hut, if you're familiar. They're just storing all kinds of stuff like barrels and tractor and all that. But
sure.
We're checking this thing up and down, and we'd been at it for probably 2 going on 3 hours. So I basically think, man, like, this is shitty. I guess we're kind of done. Not going to find this guy. But it's kind of like right at that moment, the dog gets super hot, which is basically the dog gets really animated. He's picking up odor, and he's trying to get under the tractor, but it's so low. I'm like, no one can fit under there. Like, what is he trying to get at? It's under that Quonset hut. So I thought, in my cynicism, like, there's a squirrel under there or something. There's a cat or something. He's just messing around, and we're going to call it a day. It's
still a dog. Like, they go after other stuff.
Yeah, they have their moments. Yeah.
Sure.
He's killed a couple possums on tracks, all that whole thing, because he's still a dog.
Yep.
So in any case, the original officer was, right with me, and he sees what's happening too. And, sure enough, Cato comes out, and his head's holding like this canvasy jacket. And then I just remember clear, like, that officer's like, that's his jacket. Like, and the way he said it just sent chills down my spine. I was like, where is this dude? Is he on top of us? Are we on top of him? Like, we've just been kind of, I mean, at that point, you talk about like officer safety and complacency. Like, at that point, everyone was just spent, right? We were all just kind of walking around lackadaisical. We weren't like coordinated, like, we weren't telling each other to cover angles and all that. We were just, we were sloppy.
Yep.
I'll admit that.
It happens.
And luckily that was the signal for us to all kind of snap back too. We all got kind of in the same spot. And then the dog's just going crazy under that Quonset hut. So, for people that know a little bit about canine scent, what that does is, if you're in an enclosed structure, the scent will kind of circulate. It'll do weird stuff, kind of like a current. So that's essentially what's happening is all that odor was, kind of gathering on one end of it where the guy's jacket was. But then we had to back up and be like, okay, where is this guy? And the dog was kind of working it out, but there's this end that he couldn't really get to. There were all these barrels. There's this cabinet, storage stuff. And, my sergeant goes up, and he actually, being a prior canine handler, he goes up to move some of the obstacles out of the way. And then right then I hear, show me your hands, show me your hands. And I just, for the moment, just see a dude's head pop up from behind the barrels. And then what felt like an eternity, just this pause. And then it was just pop, pop. And then pop, 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 pop.
Whoa.
And so that was the moment where, we basically all recognized where the guy was. We hear gunshots, and we just start firing at where he was. Right. So if you pivot to another officer's point of view, I didn't see this, but he saw my sergeant basically fall to the side. So he perceived that the sergeant got shot. But then it just erupts in this barrage of gunfire. And then the next thing I remember is just a boom and a whoosh. And I just remember this fireball in front of me. And then this is intense heat just like moving towards me and passing over me. Wow. I had a ball cap on,
yeah,
because it was haircut day, of course.
Right.
So my hair was not show ready.
Yeah, look at me. I look like Lyle Lovett over here.
Right. It looks good, man. But I remember clearly just dipping my head and pulling my arms up to cover my face, and just this fire passes over.
Wow.
But I remember distinctly that moment. I was like, well, it's been a good run. Like I'm done. So this is it.
That's nuts.
Yeah. So I thought I was done. Thought the dog was done. I thought really all 5 of us, 6, including the suspect, were just gone.
Were you thinking like, who knows what's in these containers? It's just blowing up now.
No, I didn't even think that at that moment. I just saw this fireball and I'm like, well, shit, like who survives that? Okay. And then a moment where it was just so hot. And again, like, in the stressful moment, things slowed down, but it felt like seconds. I was basically in the middle of this, this flame. And I just was like, how do I get out of this fire? I just felt like I remember just walking around in a quick circle, just like an about face. And I was like, it's just everywhere. Like this is over.
Yeah.
But then a couple seconds later in my mind, it passes, kind of gather myself. I'm like, where is everybody? And, one dude's crawling on the ground. We don't know if he's shot. He's wincing in pain from the fire. Luckily, it's so messed up. But he wasn't shot, right? But at the moment, he's wincing and crawling. We're trying to gather up everyone, see where everyone is. Stuff's on fire in the background. And we're just trying to gather each other up and kind of do the buddy check and get to a point of distance and maybe even cover. But we're kind of in this open area away from all the trucks. So it was a really bad spot. But as we start checking and everyone's kind of coming together, we're undoing uniforms and pulling vests off just to make sure no one's hit. And I remember someone being like, where's your dog, dude? Where's your dog? And at the moment I didn't even say anything. I just shook my head. Like there's no point to ask that. Like he's gone, right? Like there's a fireball over there. Everything's on fire. I assume the suspect and my dog were just in the flames.
Yeah.
And then pretty quickly people were like, we got to get out of here. There's all this stuff popping and fizzing. And that's true to your point, Steve. Like that was the point where we were like, what is in here?
Oh my gosh.
This landscape company, chemicals and barrels. And we're like, we got to get out of here. But shortly around that time, I hear more commands, right? Show me your hands, stop. And then sure enough, the dude's coming out of the fire like a horror movie, just stumbling toward us. And then he starts to angle off. And so that's where a couple of us fired again, and then there was actually an officer on the outside that had a rifle ready and engaged the suspect, and the suspect was shot and killed. So at that point, you kind of go back to your training, you cuff them up, you're ready we have to carry this guy out, the suspect out, and everything's still just chaotic, right? Like there's fire and people are still asking about my dog, and I'm like, I don't know. And I start kind of calling him, but people come in from the outside, and well, luckily they're kind of ushering us, right? Cause we're kind of scattered, kind of sensory overload, but people are like, we need to get farther away. And we stop. And they're like, no, we need to get farther away behind this warehouse building. We're like, geez, how far do we have to go?
Yeah.
Eventually the dog pops up.
I just would have been a dust trail, but where's Steve going? Oh, he's
right. Yeah. Just bounding over the fence. Yeah. Man, I wish your body does super crazy things. I mean, we learn about an academy, but when you feel it, like the tunnel vision and auditory exclusion, it's all pretty real. So the pop, pop, pop is, as I remember it and I picture in my head, but, what was super impactful was like talking to a buddy that was on the outer containment, who could see the whole thing happening. And what I, in my head, still would visualize as being like a 10-second ordeal. He was like, dude, that was like a second and a half or 2 seconds, right? He heard yelling, and you hear a pop, 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 boom. And then that's it. And then we're all just kind of moving away. And he's like, oh, I think everyone's okay. Right. So very different perspective, or perception. So, luckily dog's okay. I actually ended up this was after the stabbing. So after the shooting, I started nicknaming him I was like, he's he's like Kato the cat. He's got 9 lives. And through my career, I think I counted them all, actually. You know, there's a time like we almost got hit by a car where we're running across the street and I see the headlights a little too late and I let go of the lead, and it was like, Jesus, take the wheel. And the car runs over the lead, kicks it up in the air. And, you know, I basically it just runs in between the two of us. And it's only like a, 20 foot lead. So, yeah, it definitely had his share of moments. But yeah, luckily the only officer injuries were burns to me and a couple of minor burns to a couple other officers. Everyone else was okay, which is super fortunate. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a huge point of reflection in my career, and just remembering to not take things too seriously and be grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. What happened to the suspect? Was he gonzo?
Yeah, he was gone. Yeah. So what it turned out was, the best they could figure it out was, he was kind of like he was a shakedown guy. He was robbing and jacking up, lower level dealers and such. They think that he was there for a deal. And he just got super, super nervous. He was, I mean, not to make too much, so you guys make fun of him if you want, but, I actually try not to. I don't have anger at him. It's his situation and we're all okay. Mm-hmm. Sucks for his family. But he was kind of a good looking dude, which threw the original officer off because he was kind of clean cut. Yeah. And the best guess, from talking to family and people in his family, the investigators had, was that he knew that he was not going back to prison no matter what. Right. So it might've been too many strikes. You're out. It would have been a larger sentence, from his prior rap sheet. He just knew he wasn't going to go back, and he was ready to shoot it out, which he tried. Man, I just, more things are popping in with this call, but the officer that was with me that had the rifle, he actually, when the investigators came in, they saw that it was his rifle that pierced a propane tank, because of, general 9mm wouldn't do that. His rifle pierced a propane tank, and it was probably the suspect's firearm or one of the pistols closer to that little incident point that may have ignited it. The propane was leaking, it's hard to ignite propane tanks, I guess. I guess they did a Mythbusters on this years ago. But because it was in that semi-enclosed Quonset hut, the fire investigator thought it just was able to keep it at just the right density to ignite it.
Lucky you.
But on top of that, yeah, lucky me. But at the same time, I'm like, man, kind of butterfly effect, like maybe if that was ignited, like how different would the gunfight have gone? Yeah. Or maybe that's what we needed for the in the ambush. Cause we were behind the power curve always. But then the other crazy thing is that the rifle round, one of his rifle rounds, and I don't know if it's the same one, of course, but it actually hit the suspect's pistol, like right at the ejection port, knocked it out of battery. So when they tried to test fire that more, like they know that he got at least one shot off, but he wasn't able to get more off. And that might have greatly changed the ending of things.
Wow, that's crazy, man. Yeah,
man.
You definitely had the big guy looking out for you that day.
I think so. Yeah, I think everything lined up. People call it, in my department, they call it the Die Hard shooting, and it just seems a little bit too unrealistic to be, a movie scene. Right. Crazy stuff, though.
Yeah, man. When your door, just Eric's, he's got a door behind him. When it just creaked open, I was so hoping. I know it's not possible. I was hoping Kato would put his paws up on you and look in the camera, but he's not around anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Len, I don't even know he's still in here. It's our current dog, not a shepherd. Oh yeah, he's down there. He's like under the bed. Come here. This dude is a rescue. He's like a cat dog.
Hey, buddy. You know what? There's something there's something great about like a medium to small size dog that can go in the car with you, that can hop up. You know what I mean? My shepherd is like a disaster everywhere I take him. He's huge. He's got hair everywhere. Not compact.
I like the Ron Swanson quote, like, a dog, like, what is it? Like something about a dog being less than 30 pounds as a cat, and cats are useless. Like I was very much of that like mindset. My first dog ever was as an adult, and it was a lab. We had to put him down about a year ago, and hence we got this guy. And I think a lot of it was kind of contrary to you. You kind of spoke about like having the kind of mess of a shepherd before. And now you have the dream dog. I was very intentional. I was like, man, I cannot have a lab, because he was kind of the perfect, like, actually he was a high energy dog, but really good at home. Really well-mannered dog, like perfectly trained. And then I had the shepherd. It's like, I was like, you're a legit canine that was well socialized. Like what can compare to that? So we had to go this completely different direction, get this mutt. And he's very cat dog. Like he's aloof, and he does things when he wants to. And, but he's pretty easy overall. It is weird though, having a little dog.
Yeah. You get used to it though. We had a little dog before, and it was kind of fun. I kind of liked it, but, I'm into, I work a lot, so I'm into like having like a big imposing dog at home that, like it scares, like even our mailman was like, your dog terrifies me. Like, perfect.
Yeah.
Like I tell my wife all the time, I'm like if someone stops by and they're like, oh, is he friendly? I'm like, don't tell him yes, just say kind of, like don't give him, don't let him know that he's, he's pretty friendly when you finally get to know him. Eric, can you tell us, I've had you on for over an hour here, so I only have a few more questions for you.
You're good, man.
Can you tell us a heartwarming encounter you've had on the job?
Yeah, so I'll take this moment to prop up Shop with a Cop. It's a program that goes on nationally. A lot of departments do it, but it's around the holiday season, and it's usually set up through a local organization. Sometimes it's school, sometimes it's like a nonprofit, but they identify kids that come from underprivileged situations generally.
Okay.
But really, what it is it's an opportunity where you can engage in a totally non-law enforcement capacity, but you go to a store like Target, and you help these kids shop for themselves, right? And there's usually like a certain amount of money, like $100 or so. You go around the store, and it gives them an opportunity to just hang out with the kid. You get to mess around and play with toys and just be silly.
Yep. That's awesome.
But I've done it for a couple of years. Yeah. And I'll say like, I was definitely like not the community engagement, right? You hear I was in community engagement, and then I went to hiring. Most of my career was, I did not want to do anything public facing. I didn't want to interact. I just wanted to catch people. I wanted to do canine.
What was it called again, Eric? Shop with the Cop?
Shop with a Cop.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but it's not necessarily one incident, but each year I've done it, there's at least one kid that it's so hard to get them focused on them because they're so worried about finding things for their family. And I think that's just a really heartwarming, like genuine interaction where you can really connect with kids and really take it back home and bring it back to, why you do this job. But it was really through, I guess being voluntold to do community engagement stuff that I found the value in it. So
voluntold.
I want to throw it out, especially to some of the younger cops, right? They're like, that's not what I signed up for. And maybe some of the older cops I've been around for a bit that, they're in their routine, and maybe someone might even say that routines become kind of a rut. It's really easy to get cynical. And so, it's my challenge and my invitation to get outside your comfort zone. Sometimes that's just doing like the simple fun stuff, the silly stuff, just makes it human again.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. I see that on, Facebook pages and stuff like that. That's really cool. Like I can remember my father, before that was a thing, told me a story about he caught a kid, shoplifting, but he just needed a winter coat. So he went back in and bought him the coat, on duty, which I thought was like, it was a really, it made sense because my dad was is a very caring and like, good man. And, but now I see that like things like that are like actually getting supported and are done by police departments. I love that. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many examples. I think we all have peers that are really about it, and then ones that really shy away from the limelight. The last thing they would want is for it to be on a Facebook page or something like that. But I will say, even to those people, like, hey, like, you don't do it for the attention, but that attention can be so powerful just to help people empathize, right? And help people, the quote, like, or the phrase behind the badge. Yeah, we're all people, and you get into this job because you want to take care of people. But yeah, there's just so much divisiveness and polarizing BS out there that I think that you can take those opportunities and use them, right, rather than just discarding them.
Absolutely. Eric, one last question. I know you saw me, just for people listening, I have this like program. I'm trying to be fancy. I was going to do now the internet is up, and I was going to try to do the shop with a cop thing, but, can you hear that beeping noise? No,
I can't.
I can't. It won't let me type into the really cool screen I set up with me and Eric on either side. It's Google. I was going to pull up Shop with the Cop. All right, that was dumb.
It looks high speed. It looks good though.
It looks sweet. Didn't work.
In the interest of time, we won't do it, but he totally can if he wants to.
Right. And I do like almost no editing, so it's going to stay in. Last question for you, Eric. It's a big question. I always say one of the best emails I get, and I get a lot of them from people saying like, I heard your guest and you talk about X, Y, and Z, and I actually decided to pull the trigger on being a cop. That is so awesome to me and so touching, and I love to get those emails in messages. So advice you would give to the person in the process, someone thinking about being a police officer, what should they know getting into it?
Yeah, I would say like have realistic expectations, not just of the job, but of yourself. It's the people business. You got to care about people, but you got to take care of yourself too. And so I guess this will be kind of my peer support and like emotional health and wellness plug. But as doers, people that are willing to take on this risk, it's really easy to focus on others. It's really easy to distract from the fact that you need to take care of yourself. You got to put the oxygen mask on yourself before others, or you're of no good to your team or your family or your community. So I just know personally so many awesome cops, awesome people that, they put everyone else in front of themselves and they're not well because of it. Right. Or they had to retire earlier than they wanted to. And it's like everyone, they have their time, right? It might be in the career, it might be on this earth. We don't get to choose oftentimes, but man, there's so much we can do to try to hedge that. Just so support your people, support yourself, and give yourself some grace. So even if you're a new cop or you're struggling to just kind of get your in, like be patient with the process, be patient with yourself. Know that there's a ton of good stuff you can do to better the community that doesn't have to be this job. And maybe it's just a for now kind of thing, right? Maybe you find your niche or your way in a couple years later, and that's fine too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I had lots of candidates that had applied and tried to be cops like multiple times, like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. And they finally made it, and they are fantastic police officers. So don't let that slow you down. You never know the situations behind the scenes, why you're not being selected. But if it is your dream, keep at it, keep doing it. You can always be doing it when you're doing your other job. And you will make it if you're persistent. So Eric, thank you so much for coming on, brother. Let's talk about where people can find you. I have Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram and Blue Grit Radio. Any place else?
Yeah, bluegritwellness.com is my blog. It's not as active as the other 2 projects right now, but you can find me there and subscribe. And yeah, I appreciate you sharing and asking questions, and let me know how I can help.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Honored to have you on. I'm going to do the outro here. Can you hang up for a second in the green room?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, man.
All right. The great Eric Tung, ladies and gentlemen. Really fun to have him on. Man, that last story was totally nuts. Honored that he shared it with us. And guys, thank you. Thank you for all the 5-star reviews now and in the future that you will be giving me. Hopefully, I appreciate it. Patreon if you really, really love the show. But I will stress that if you can't afford it, or it's not in the budget, don't worry about it. The show's gonna remain free. That's only if you really want to go over the top and support me that way. So no pressure that way. Yeah, guys. Oh, you know what? Oh, geez, let me forget. It's that time of the show where we thank the Patreon sergeants, and who I'm talking about is Richard Tolles, John DeFries, the great Raymond Arsenal, Doug and Kelly Newman, Dan from Burley Boards, Derek Warden, Scott Young, Wayne Miller, Nick Noose, Tom Connell, Just Dennis, George Tessier, Daniel from Motocrop Chronicles, Greg Gadboy, Ben Peters, Scott Minkler, the great Tammy Walsh, Sean Clifford, Braden Walker, Sasha McNabb, Corey Payne, the great Mike Wynn, Nathan Gowan, Jason Lau, Lauren Simpson, Brandon Hooker, Jake Pinito, John Shoemaker, James Rose, Seth Wright, Tony Fahey, William James Long, that's Deputy William James Long to you, Andy Biggs, Chris June, Adam Mihal, the great Gary Steiner, and the handsome Lane Campbell. Thank you for your support on Patreon. I love you guys. I'm in love with you. You are the best. I appreciate it. And I will see you guys next week.
It's golf's happy place when you're at your Paramus, East Hanover, White Plains, or Westbury area PGA Tour Superstore locations. PGA Tour Superstores are the home for golf pros and beginners. You'll find the largest selection of golf clubs, shoes, men's and women's apparel, and so much more. Get custom fit for any club in your bag or see how your existing clubs perform in a studio evaluation. PGA Tour Superstore certified fitters work with industry-leading launch monitor technology like TrackMan. Come get the PGA Tour Superstore quality launch monitor with Golf Radar, indoor high-definition golf simulator for swing and ball flight tracking, analysis, and entertainment. Need to improve your game? Get out to your local PGA Tour Superstore and spend some time with a PGA Tour Superstore certified teaching professional and become a master of the links. Come visit any of the stores in Paramus, East Hanover, White Plains, or Westbury. Go to a PGA Tour Superstore location today or visit PGATourSuperstore.com and be ready to have a great time on the links.